deadliest serial killer. I heard this story like
50 unsolved strangulation cases that could be the work of a serial killer.
Dozens of women who were all strangled or asphyxiated. Their cases remain unsolved.
A serial killer on the loose in Chicago.
A lady by the name of Tamala Edwards was found in 2210 in a garbage can just like this in this alley 20 years ago.
Their bodies were found in vacant lots, abandoned buildings, and alleys, dumped in garbage cans, and some even set on fire.
Why do you think they specifically targeted your mama?
Have you ever been abducted?
Yeah. He killed so many women, he don't know how many.
Is there one of these killers that you think is doing the lion's share of the killing?
Yes.
In today's episode, we are investigating the infamous Chicago Strangler, a killer who some experts say has taken the lives of between 50 and 70 women over a nearly 2-decade period, making this person one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. The killer's MO seems to be this. He tends to hunt primarily black women, many of them who are sex workers, and he kills them by strangulation after he lures them into alleyways on the south and west sides of Chicago. The question right off the bat is this: why isn't this being discussed more? Because I'm guessing for many of you watching,
it's not going to be a black dude, you know. This serial killer is actually white.
this is your first time hearing of a guy who, to put it in perspective, may have killed 3 to 4 times more people than Jeffrey Dahmer. To properly dive into this, we assembled a cast of experts. First, Mike Hammond, a retired Chicago homicide detective who has put dozens of murderers behind bars in his career. Next, Thomas Hargrove, the founder of the Murder Accountability Project, an organization with the country's most complete accounting of unsolved murders. And Thomas is known as a guy that can algorithmically predict with a high degree of accuracy if a serial killer is in your city. Then we got Reverend Hood, a pastor and community leader who has built a network supporting survivors of strangler victims, and Reverend Hood claims to have sat face to face to the guy who is the primary suspect of this all. Next up, Rabbi Ben Yosef, a community activist demanding justice for the victims, who takes it upon himself to bring us to some of the murder sites. And finally, we even speak with a family member of a strangler victim and with Chicago citizens who live in the areas where the strangler strikes. Let's get to it.
So like this whole thing happened like years ago. So what is the point of this video?
We're gonna meet a community leader who's been tracking down these murders, trying to bring justice to these victims and their families. In fact, we're very close to a murder site where a murder happened 20 years ago in this alley behind me.
20 years ago, so what's the point of this
unsolved?
video, bro?
Pretty much all of them have been unsolved.
And how many are we talking?
We're talking 51 plus.
In 2004, Tamala Edwards was murdered right here in this alley. The killer strangled her, wrapped her up in a comforter that was then tightly bound with duct tape, and placed her in a garbage can, where she eventually was discovered.
A lady by the name of Tamala Edwards.
Bro, that sound effect is crazy.
In a garbage can just like this in this alley 20 years ago.
Yep. The way how these murders happen is, as you just said, a graphic example of no regard for human life. To put a human life within a garbage can, to say, I'm going to do this to this person, just goes to show how horrific and how much an outcry and outrage there should be within the city.
Dude, man, it was very horrific. 20 years and people actually still cry about it.
What comes to mind when people say the Chicago Strangler?
I think it's more than one. We believe that it's more than one strangler. I would have felt better if it was said mass murder, something to culminate that more than 51 women got killed.
There's certainly not one. We know that for sure, because the 51, there's 21 different DNA profiles.
21 different DNA profiles.
We found that the overwhelming majority of these homicides involved women who were strangled or asphyxiated, and their bodies were left out of doors, often in abandoned buildings, empty alleyways.
I think something happens to wake that demon up that's in their cranium. And once that demon is woken up, then it goes on the bend of killing women.
On the quest to build a profile of who this killer is, let's reference one of the most popular serial killer prediction frameworks, the McDonald Triad, created by psychiatrist John McDonald and used by famous serial killer hunters like Special Agent John Douglas. The three behaviors noted in this theory are obsessive fire setting, persistent bedwetting, and cruelty towards animals. This theory has faced pushback by researchers, but what it hones in on is the question on everyone's mind, which is if we can determine the common factors of serial killers, will we be better able to stop and apprehend serial killers before they go too far?
And they won't stop until that being in their brains settle down.
Her life mattered, that there should be closure for her.
So is the bin still at the same spot for like I don't get this point of the point.
It's very strange to be in a location, the exact location that you know someone lost their life in a struggle. You can say whatever you want about her occupation, but she was another human living life, trying to make money and trying to provide. And to end up in a garbage can is such a horrific way to go.
Disproportionately, these victims are sex workers or have a history of using illegal drugs.
We go to great lengths to bring you guys inside scoops on a story. How sketchy would you say this is?
It's up there.
Miguel, sketchy rating?
10.
So is it common in your world to hear of women that go missing?
Yeah, you hear stuff all the time, like this like 30-some-year-old white lady that they found on Lake Cook Road that was like 13 or 16 weeks pregnant when they found her. But she was missing for like 2 days. And then it was 2 weeks before that, somebody else was found near like 5th and Cicero.
So I think it's a serial killer killing motherfuckers, right? I think they just don't be talking about it like that. People like body parts and stuff coming up, people be finding about a river, that shit is normal. So it's like, how the fuck is that normal?
He's gotta be 45 to 65. He's definitely a city worker, you know, because he knows the neighborhoods, he knows where the whole stroll is, he knows where to dump these girls.
What makes you say for sure city worker?
He understands what neighborhoods he can get away with it in and what neighborhoods he can't. And he knows how to move, and he knows probably when the police changes are, shift changes.
A lot of the people that get snatched up is like streetwalkers, right?
Yeah.
So what attracts a streetwalker faster? A white guy with some money, an older white man with some money. So it gotta be an older white male.
But he's also targeting girls that are just hooked on shit out here.
We asked a serial killer expert, and what he says, if you want to know the color of the killer, look at the color of the victim, and almost always it matches.
Our most likely scenario is like 3 multiple victim killers. 2 are African American and 1 is white.
And how do you know that?
It's what the evidence suggests. One of the victims had DNA at her crime scene that was recovered, and it matched another sexual assault. The victim survived and described a man who had a mustache and apparently a fake Hispanic accent, but was definitely Caucasian.
Have you ever experienced danger on the job?
Yeah, so white guy used to like back up, and then literally he would make you take your shoes off, and it would be like dead winter. Like you'll have no shoes in the middle of dead winter trying to like get away.
So it's a way to keep you under control in the car.
I guess, so you can, yeah, exactly. So most lately, the thing that a lot of people have been doing is having you get in the back seat, and there's like the child safety lock will be on, so you can't get out.
That's happened to you before?
Yeah.
Is that scary?
Yeah.
What do you do in that situation?
It's like your heart sinks, like you just get that feeling.
You're in the highest risk profession for getting a serial killer.
Right.
What does that make you think?
It's a risk, but sometimes people are like, don't feel like they have a choice, so.
That is crazy.
Just down the alley over there, Makalova Williams was killed just down here. She was killed in 2004. Do you know anything about this particular killing or this particular victim?
Yeah, I do. Pretty sad story. She was in foster care most of her young life. It's alleged she was sexually abused in foster care. She would come back up here to Chicago, and then she's an 18-year-old on her own, and you know, she starts in on the streets, you know.
So many victims of sex trafficking, they left home, they were runaways who apparently thought that they had had enough.
want to recreate the same.
So this was 20 years ago, so this building may have not...
Yeah, this is much cleaner than it was then. This door was open, and she was actually found in a bag, like a duffel bag, like a laundry bag. Almost impossible, you'd think, looking at it, you get a body in there.
Continue to fight for you and stand with you. And we'll do whatever I can to make sure your name is not forgotten.
How do we bridge the gap that people want to work with police, people feel comfortable with police are more equipped to do their job? What do you guys think about some of those things?
I don't think there's a disregard for activists such as myself to work with detectives. I do work with detectives and police on these issues.
Will you be looked at as a snitch if you work with detectives and police?
Could be, but the fact is my job is to bring justice. That's what we stand on.
Let's talk about why Chicago is the perfect hunting grounds for a serial killer to lurk. The truth is, Chicago has an unacceptably low homicide clearance rate. And for reference, a clearance rate refers to the percentage of criminal cases that are solved.
How would you rate the Chicago PD performance in finding the perp?
I think you're always trying to do your best, and you're trying to... No life has, to me and the people I worked with, no life has more or less value than another, because you're always talking to the victims' families, so you're trying to always do the best you can.
Historically, Chicago's homicide solve rate has been concerning. In 2016, the city reported a clearance rate of just 21%, which is much lower than the national average of 60% at that time. In other words, 80% of the time, the murderer gets away. That is insane.
The cycle keeps getting worse and worse.
Worse, and it spans, and then we have another 20, 30 years in these cases are not getting solved because of distrust.
I don't see the Chicago Police Department.
So they still haven't solved the cases of 51 murderers?
Just simply afraid that they're going to be prosecuted or
no way,
just for trying to do the job.
5,000 police investigations in Illinois are awaiting DNA test results. The backlog is huge, and today at a hearing, lawmakers demanded action on 50 unsolved strangulation cases that could be the work of a serial killer.
My theory is this: the Chicago Strangler has been able to remain undetected for so long because he operated in a perfect storm. First, his victims. He targets women in poor communities working vulnerable jobs like sex work. Sadly, the people he kills don't seem to generate the same uproar that a brutal murder of a suburban lady would. Next, he kills in neighborhoods that already have high crime, thereby allowing his crimes to blend in better due to the police being overloaded with cases to work. And finally, these neighborhoods are places where police trust is quite low, which leads to a general lack of collaboration of citizens willing to work with police and give them helpful information to help solve the crime. What do you guys think in the comments?
Have you ever been...
Great factor, bro. It's a great factor why these cases are still not being solved. Because just imagine being an incident happening in a community where people are not able or willing to collaborate with the police to get a solution. There will surely be no answer to it.
What was that like? What happened?
So I guess there was like 3 brothers, and one of them kidnapped me and brought me back to like this house. I guess they were selling drugs out of because they had...
Why does she sound like that, bro?
Dog, like something and literally kept me there. I was there 3 days, and just like the guy wouldn't leave, and I just had it like I couldn't leave. Like I think I got McDonald's like one time, so he ended up leaving, and the door guy or person, whoever was working the spot, I literally just like threw the board and went flying. He started chasing me. There's like ice, middle of winter, no shoes, went flying down the alley. There was this car coming down the alley with this lady, and I'm like screaming like help me or whatever, and she just like kept going. They don't care, just leave the windows up. Like,
oh really?
We're gonna talk to family members of the victims. You know, this is potentially a very painful moment for a lot of these people. I know when my pop died, I didn't really confront the grief for a long time. And I was challenged by a mentor of mine to journal about it, write it down. And it was a very painful process, but it also was very healing, revisiting the memories. And I think it was a big step in the recovery process of losing somebody. So I'm honored that they're telling us their story, because a lot of news outlets have reached out to them and they're talking to us. So I appreciate that. We're gonna go in and visit them, and we'll see you inside.
You know, I was involved in as far as from the homicide detective input thing, but the impact of the families, as Mike always tells you, you know, and he's taking it to a whole nother level
But all detectives know we have to make those phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, and God bless you if you never had to make those calls or face-to-face, not even say calls, really face-to-face meetings for the most part and stuff, where you have to, give this bad news to people and stuff. It's like, that's probably like one of the hardest parts of the job. Can you imagine this young lady, how her life trajectory has changed, not having her mother here since she was 9 years old.
Can do all things through Christ.
Well, my mother meant the world to me. I love and I really miss my mom. It's more so in the back of my mind because I really don't try to think about it because it's just too painful just knowing that it is someone out there possibly that's responsible for the death of my mom
is so cute.
And also 50 other women. I want her to be remembered as a loving, caring, free spirit, very fun to be around person that loves her children.
Why do you think they specifically targeted your mom?
I think she was just at the wrong place at that time. She was probably stalked and watched. It was a familiar place, and I feel like, they knew her or seen her there before, so it's a possibility. They felt like, she was some type of target, so yeah, I think that's why.
Wrong place, wrong time.
The victims,
is another huge thing, bro.
Definitely strangulation.
Is that considered as an accident?
Body parts missing, torsos. On the west side of Chicago, it was in a 2-mile radius, the victims he killed. On the south side of Chicago, it could be up to 3 to 4 miles. South side of Chicago is a lot bigger, and we believe the number was a lot higher on the south side of Chicago, because you're like, this guy here either got off the train stop or somebody that was a professional known in the community to get away with something, like a teacher or something of that sort that's been known in the community. That's what gets me when I look at those deaths. So this person is methodical, and any gaps makes me think he was either in jail or the hospital.
Serial killers should never be off the streets. They all should be locked up and the key thrown away. I don't think that there's no help for them. Teeny weeny component of a cell is buried in their crania, and it is not going to go away unless there's some type of surgery that can be performed on those type of people.
Is there one of these killers that you think is doing the lion's share of the killing?
Yes, Darren Dion Vaughn.
Darren Dion Van shocked the nation in 2014 when police arrested him for the murder of Africa Hardy in Hammond, Indiana. But what began as a single case quickly unfolded into something much darker. Van confessed to killing at least 6 more women, leading investigators to his victims' remains in abandoned homes across Gary, Indiana, thereby earning him the nickname of the Gary Strangler. But is it possible that Darren could also be the Chicago Strangler? In his confession, Van hinted that he had been killing for nearly 20 years and his style of killing matches with the MO of the Chicago Strangler. Many experts, like Thomas Hargrove, think that Darren could very well be responsible. Because many of the Chicago murders are near the train line, it's easy to imagine Darren boarding the train from Gary, getting out at a Chicago stop on the south and west sides, giving in to his killing impulse, then returning home to Gary. What's more is in his confession interviews with the police, Van claims to have victims across multiple states.
And Darren Vaughn told police in Hammond, Indiana, he's made a lot of mistakes.
4 or 5 in California. How many in North Carolina? 1, because I ain't stayed long. Texas, I think there's 2. At least 2 in Milwaukee. And there's 3 in Minnesota.
Milwaukee? That is where Tommy is from, bro.
Chicago. A lot.
One of the goals of setting out to do this was to try.
There's 3 in Minnesota. I'm saying about 7 in Detroit. How many in Chicago? Chicago is a lot.
One of the goals of setting out to do this was to try and solve some of these murders. And so with many of the fingers pointing towards Darren Dion Van, we sent him a letter and we reached out to the Indiana Department of Corrections portal in attempts to reach him. Now we have no idea if the letter that we sent to Wabash Correctional to Darren made it to him. Maybe it didn't make it past security. So we're still waiting for a response so that we can pursue those leads further.
A theory of why Darren's claims of killing more women wasn't explored further is that Indiana investigators wanted to lock him away with certainty rather than complicate his case by making it federal. However, experts like Detective Mike Hammond would argue that Darren could not have possibly killed all these women. The Chicago Strangler is thought to have killed till 2018, and Darren, arrested in 2014, was already locked away in prison. And secondly, because of the multitude of DNA samples found in the victims, leading Mike to think that we are dealing with multiple killers. The problem is, with many of the victims being prostitutes, being found with multiple DNA samples is to be expected and just further complicates tracking down the killer.
You had a conversation with Darren Dion Van.
Yo, it's not their fault they can't find the killers, bro. It's not their fault.
One of the guys responsible for most of the bodies. Tell me about your conversation with him.
He had no problem with talking about the girls he killed in Gary, Indiana, which is exactly 40 minutes from here. Gary, Indiana is across the street, basically, right? But when he talked about Chicago, he said he killed so many he can't remember. And to look at this man, this young man in his face, that was part of the armed services, that looked like he would even swat a fly, to tell you he don't know how many people he killed, it's sickening. It hits me to the gut. I know. We're talking about 51.
Glaze me, bro.
85. There's no connection to all 85, but there's still 85 women that's been killed in Chicago.
We first detected him in Gary, Indiana, where he was responsible for most of a cluster of 15 murders of women. And then the algorithm signaled that there was a very similar cluster occurring in Chicago, a much larger cluster. And the Gary, Indiana murders go back to the 90s, but the cluster in Chicago started around 2001. And we think that's when Mr. Vaughn discovered the joys of public transit. We think he took the Chicago Transit Green Line into the city when he had what he called killing urges. Produced a map showing the body recovery sites of these 51.
Someone,
and you'll see a linear pattern of 9 or so victims that occurred right along the Green Line. He has been killing his whole adult life, and he has a difficult time establishing normal relations with women. He speaks to getting killing urges. In fact, you can see his confession at our website. When he gets killing urges, he can't afford his own home, so he was living with his brother and his brother's family. When he would get killing urges, he had to leave. He couldn't stay in the home and possibly harm members of his own family. So he would leave. He would walk around Gary, Indiana, or he would go further afoot. It was a very random murder. They were grabbed and usually killed close to where their bodies were found. Nothing very sophisticated in these murders, just opportunistic.
How sure are you that Darren Dion Van has claimed lives in Chicago?
Look at him straight in his eye. He's not lying. He killed so many women, he don't know how many. Now, do I think he killed all 51? No.
It would be nice to point the finger at Darren Dion Van, accuse him to be the likely suspect of all these murders, get some closure and move on. However, it is impossible that Darren did all these murders. There were 5 murders that happened between 2004 and 2005 that he couldn't have done because he was serving time in an Indiana jail. What he did was, in front of police, he threatened to kill his girlfriend by holding a gas can and lighter in one arm while the other arm was around her neck. There are an additional 5 murders from 2009 and 2013 that he couldn't have done because he was serving a 5-year prison sentence in Texas for a brutal sexual assault. So there are at least 10 murders from this period that Darren could not have done. This further supports Detective Hammond and Thomas Hargrove's theory that there are multiple killers involved, but unfortunately, it also further complicates this death mystery.
When was the last time you were contacted by police regarding your mother's death?
I was never contacted. They contacted my grandmother one time, and it was for identification purposes. When I got older, I contacted them, and they didn't even know anything. They barely knew who she was.
Really?
Like, oh, the case is the file. We delete the files or something like that. Or they don't carry the files.
What does that make you think?
They just don't care. Because I don't think it's a complex case. I mean, she was found somewhere where she stayed, where she frequently visit and hung out at. So, I mean, I don't feel like it should have been hard to find out, you know what I'm saying, who done it, but at least, like, gather like some type of information as to what happened.
So some of the comments I've gotten is if all the victims were white ladies that were accountants or middle class, that the murders would already been solved right now. But because a lot of the women are black women, minority women that are working the streets, no one cares, the cops aren't gonna bother. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, so in general, Chicago is pretty low on their success rate of solving any kind of murder. It's like 20 or 30%, it's really low. I don't think it's necessarily what color you are, it's just that they know that a lot of those people have like left their homes or whatever, their families used to them going on binges, missing, you know, so no one will be exactly looking for them right away.
So no one's really sure where they are anyways.
Yeah, and like a lot of people don't have families, so if they were to die, who's gonna know anyway?
You ever thought that your mom was got by the Chicago Strangler?
Part of me, yes and no.
I don't think this is even a reaction because I'm just like amazed.
Part of me,
well, I say amazed or perplexed watching this.
So we've heard about the crimes Darren may have committed, but what do we know about who this guy is? Little about his childhood is known other than he grew up in Indiana, and in 1991 he enlisted in the Marine Corps but received an other than honorable discharge after only 2 years in the service. The specific reasons for his discharge have not been publicly disclosed. What we do know about Darren is this: he has a notable criminal background. However, there is something potentially disturbing that we uncovered. According to a confidential source, he has been arrested over 75 times. However, most of his rap sheet has been redacted. Why? With guys like Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy, we have enough information about them to make a Netflix series. But when it comes to Darren, there's barely any information out on his past on the internet, and what is documented has been censored. Why?
What were her injuries, if you don't mind me asking? Was she shot?
No, she was strangled and just beat up real bad to the point where it damaged her brain severely. She was on life support for 2 years before my grandfather decided to pull the plug.
I can't imagine what that's like going into a room with a family member that you love. They're disfigured, they're beaten up, and having to...
That's not a homicide. Someone was beaten to death. They didn't die at the spot.
Kiana, so does this alley look familiar to you?
Yeah, it does.
And what's going through your head right now?
Just memories and stuff with my mom. These are my last memories with her. We used to stay down here and go to the grocery store across the street.
So you used to live close by?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess what's running through your guys' heads right now?
So I'm looking from a cold case perspective. What year would have been? What year was it?
99.
99.
Yeah.
So, you know, several time ago. So much of this has changed. I can see now about 10 video cameras. Probably weren't here at the time. There are probably buildings that were here, right, that were multi-unit buildings. So I want to know if I could go back and find out what buildings were there, were they multi-unit buildings, who lived there, and you can do that. It's a lot of work, but it can be done. You know, I'd be really wanting to look at the specifics of where she was discovered exactly, like within as many feet as I can, and things like that. So this is a tough place because it's pretty desolate.
2 questions. One for each of you is, at any given time, how many murders could a homicide detective be looking at once?
It varied from 13 to 25, 30 at times. But then, you know, because I worked on cold cases, I would take on a lot of cases.
Yeah. So there is a perception that if you're poor or if you're black, that the police don't care as much about the murder. As a black detective, can you give the other side of the table?
Yeah, well, I get the other side of the table, and some of that is accurate, you know. So I'm not here, you know. I mean, I love the police department, you know. I mean, it's gas, but I tell people all the time, but I'm not a spokesman for the police department. I mean, you know, there's some dog asses on the police department. There's some dog asses at the post office. Why you didn't get your mail on time, you know. That exists in every line of work. The police just seem to be highlighted and spotlighted more and stuff, obviously, and you know, for good reason in some cases.
I mean, does it kind of blow your mind that someone could potentially get away with killing 50, 60, 70 women and not get caught?
Yeah, it saddens me because it's like, how can you take a job and, you know what I'm saying, not even care about doing it properly, and especially when it comes to, you know, human life and women.
If you could say a message to the Chicago Police Department, what would you tell them?
I would just tell them, like, if it's possible, take a second, you know, look, you know, I know you got other things going on and other things that you do, but this is just important.
If you could sit across from the strangler, what would you say to the guy?
Yeah, I would just ask, like, why? Like, took my mom away, like, and it's crazy asking that because it reminds me of a conversation I had with my dad when I was younger. The person, you know, you feel like the person who did it, you know, do they deserve to die or whatever? And I was telling him, like, no, I don't feel like, you know, they deserve to die or whatever. And, you know, I was young back then and stuff like that. But I, you know, now that I'm older, you know, adult, you know, I kind of still feel the same way, you know.
Did listening to detectives talk today change your perception at all?
Yeah, I know they have a hard job to do, but, you know, I just still can't, I still hold resentment towards them or whatever because it is my mom, and I feel like they didn't do everything that they could have done to try to solve the case, and I feel like the case wasn't too complex. It was things that I feel like that could have been done that wasn't done, like, and I feel like they didn't care because of race. And
do you think closure would make you feel better?
Bro, whenever race is a factor, the conversation is biased, bro.
Definitely just knowing, you know, what happened and why, you know, it happened and why they did this. Even if they say, like, oh, I did it because I was high or something, you know, I'll take that. I'd rather, you know what I'm saying, have, you know what I'm saying, partially something on the plate than nothing at all, you know.
Folks, the reality is there are still many cases, upwards of 50 to 70 women, that have not been solved. And our goal is to bring some closure to these cases. So if you have any connections to the Indiana Department of Corrections or ways of speaking to Darren Dion Van or know anything about these murders that might help solve them, please reach out to me at TommyGMcGee123@gmail.com, because our goal is to help these cases become solved. And perhaps with you, the audience, we can crowdsource this happening. So email me, reach out if you have any leads. Thank you for joining me on this episode.
And see you next week. Let's go. W's in the chat. Don't forget to like and subscribe. YouTube thinks you like these videos up here. Bro, if you have any information out there, drop it in his email and let's get this case solved. W's in the chat for 20 years, 20 good years, and they're still having, like, no arrests have been made. That's crazy, bro. It's crazy. Yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you in the next one.